Ritty Paul, former professor and head of our department. Today's topic: Why Nation Fail? Insight from the Nobel Prize in Economic Science 2024 invite us to explore the dynamic of economic progress, drawing lessons from groundbreaking research that has shaped modern economic thought. And to guide us through the powerful insight, we have with us an illustrious academic professor, Bindu Balagopal, a name that resonates deeply within the realm of economic and beyond. Before we before we begin today's program, let's invoke blessing of Almighty God. I call upon Anaga for the prayer.
ഹൃദയരാഗതന്ത്രിമീട്ടി സ്നേഹഗീതമേകിയും കർമ്മഭൂമി തളിരിടുന്ന വർണ്ണമേകിയും നമ്മിൽ വാഴുമാതിനാമം എന്നും വാഴ്ത്തിടാം ഞങ്ങൾ പാടുമീ സ്വരങ്ങൾ കീർത്തനങ്ങളാകണേ ചോടുവയ്ക്കുമീ പദങ്ങൾ നൃത്തലോലമാകണേ കുഞ്ഞു വീടിനുൾക്കളങ്ങൾ സ്വർഗമാകണേ അമ്മ നൽകുമുമ്മ പോലും അമൃതമാകണേ പൂർണ്ണമേ ചരാചരങ്ങൾ ഗുരുവരങ്ങളാകണേ ഹൃദയരാഗതന്ത്രിമീട്ടി സ്നേഹഗീതമേകിയും കർമ്മഭൂമി തളിരിടുന്ന വർണ്ണമേകിയും നമ്മിൽ വാഴുമാതിനാമം എന്നും വാഴ്ത്തിടാം.
Let us start the day by inviting our head of department, Mr. Nigel Jacobi, to extend a warm welcome to our resource person and participant. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Parvati. Am I audible?
Yes, sir.
Okay, fine. Good evening, everyone. Most respected resource person of the day, Professor Bindu Balagopal, esteemed faculty members, distinguished participants joining us from various parts of the country, and my dear loving students. It's my distinct honor to welcome you all to this invited talk organized by the Department of Economics, Sacred Heart College, Chalakudy, Kerala, in association with IQAC. And today's session is particularly meaningful as we come together to honor the contributions of our esteemed former professor and head of the Department of Economics, Reverend Sister Ritty Paul. We are indeed privileged to build upon the foundations she laid. The theme of today's session, Why Nations Fail, Insights from the Nobel Prize in Economics 2024, invites us to engage deeply with some of the most pressing questions in economics. And this year, the prestigious Nobel Prize in Economics has been awarded jointly by Darren Amiglu, Simon Johnson, and James A. Robinson for their transformative research into the institutions shape the prosperity of nations. And their studies reveal into how institutions shape the prosperity of nations and political and economic frameworks of societies critically influence their paths toward growth, stability, or decline, highlighting the role of inclusive and accountable institutions as drivers of long-term success. And we are truly honored to have with us today Professor Bindu Balagopal, an accomplished economist with a remarkable career spanning over 3 decades. As professor and head of the Department of Economics of Government Victoria College, Palakkad, Kerala, Professor Balagopal has distinguished herself through extensive research contributions in esteemed journals and her dedication to academic membership. Ma'am is also a gifted creative writer and translator with notable contributions to literature that further broaden her influence and intellectual presence. And we are truly honored to have you here with you, ma'am. And also, I extend a warm welcome to you, ma'am, and heartfelt thanks for accepting our invitation. And I would like to also extend welcome to Ms. Haripriya Esnad, Assistant Professor in Department of Economics, who will be delivering the vote of thanks and formally conclude the session. And to all participants who have joined us from different parts of India, and we are grateful for your presence and enthusiasm in making this event a success. With this, I wind up and thank you. Wish you all the best.
Thank you, sir, for your heartfelt welcome. It's now my privilege to introduce today's speaker, Professor Bindu Balagopal. She is distinguished economist with an illustrious career spanning over 30 years. As professor and head of the Department of Economics at Government Victoria College, Palakkad, she has contributed significantly to the field of economics through her extensive research and publication is in esteemed national and international journals. Beyond academic, Professor Bintu Balagopal is also gifted writer and translator, sharing her creative through engaging story, poem, and translation of the world literature. Ma'am, we are honored to have you with us today. We eagerly await your thoughts on profound question why nation fails. Over to you, ma'am.
Good evening. Am I audible?
Yes, ma'am, you are audible.
Okay. So I thank uh, the head of the department of Sacred Hearts College, Chalakudy, Nijil Jacobi, and the organizers of the program for giving me this opportunity. I'll be talking to you about the contributions of the Nobel Prize winners of economics in 2024. Is the screen visible?
Yeah, yes, ma'am, it's visible.
Okay. So this year's Nobel Prize winners are Darren S. Moglu, James A. Robinson, and Simon Johnson.
Ma'am, we appreciate if it is in full screen mode.
Okay, fine. Okay. So is it okay now? Okay.
No, I think you have to start from beginning. Just
Okay. Okay.
when you present, make it end a screen, present end a screen. That will be fine.
Okay.
I think you can start again.
Okay, we'll do that.
Share the end a screen.
I don't think that's working. Actually, okay. Let me check.
Ma'am, that was working. Can you share it once again? That was okay.
Okay.
Ma'am, it is muted. Can you unmute? Yeah, yeah. Yeah,
Okay.
take your slide now. Take your slide now. Everything is perfect. Take your slide now. Yes, yes.
Okay.
And
Now,
yeah,
is it visible?
present it in slideshow
Okay.
from the beginning. Then it will be fine. Slideshow from the beginning. Yeah, yeah. It's perfectly fine, man.
Okay, fine. So is the screen visible now? It's
Yeah,
okay.
yeah. It's
Okay.
perfect. It's
Okay.
perfect.
Okay. So this year's Nobel Prize winners are Darren Acemoglu, James Robinson, and Simon Johnson. And I have structured this lecture uh, on the basis of three books written by these authors. Why Nations Fail, which was published in 2012, The Narrow Corridor, States, Societies, and the Fate of Liberty, published in 2019, and Power and Progress, Our Thousand Year Struggle Over Technology and Prosperity, which was published in 2023. So, a glance through these books will reflect the contributions of these economists. So we'll first discuss the question of why nations fail. So the economists Darren Acemoglu and Robinson have discussed that, or have raised the question why some nations are prosperous, why people in some nations have a better standard of living, why are they better educated, why they have better health facilities when compared to other countries. So, what makes some countries prosper and what makes some countries stagnate or fall into a decline? So, this was the question discussed in the book Why Nations Fail. And the cover page of the book shows a photo. It shows two parts of a city. That is, the city of Nogales is actually divided into two areas. The city of Nogales, one part lies in America and the other part lies in Mexico. The top portion of this photo shows the city of Nogales in America, which shows a well-developed city, and the bottom portion of the photo shows the city of Nogales in Mexico, which is almost barren, shows a barren land. The photo is more clear in the book cover. I have downloaded the image here. Uh, so the top portion of the city of Nogales in the American state of Arizona, which shares the border with a city also named Nogales in Mexico. So there is a very big difference in the standard of living of people in the northern side and southern side of the border. If you search for images, you can see that there is a fence separating the two cities. There is just a fence in between. One side of the city but lies in America and the other side lies in Mexico. So compared to the residents of Nogales on the Mexican side, the residents of the American side enjoy better food, better housing, better educational facilities, medical facilities, infrastructure, law and order, so that there's more safety. Now, development economists have attributed the differences in the level of development to various factors like geographical situation, historical circumstances, cultural differences. But Acemoglu and Robinson say that the residents of the American and Mexican sides of the border, they share the same geography, they have the same history, they share the same culture and ancestry, they eat the same kind of food and listen to the same kind of music. Then why is there such a difference, or why is there such an economic inequality between them? According to Acemoglu and Robinson, the answer lies in the differences in economic and political institutions. Now, an economic institution may enforce a rule that what you produce belongs only to you, and a political institution rules about elections. Now, Acemoglu and Robinson calls or distinguishes between two kinds of institutions. One kind of institution which is conducive to economic prosperity, they call them as inclusive institutions. And those institutions which benefit only a small power group, they are called extractive institutions. So to discuss on why some nations prosper and why some nations decline, they say that it is because of the presence or absence of these institutions, either inclusive institutions or extractive institutions. So inclusive institutions contribute towards economic prosperity, while extractive institutions benefit only a select few power group. Inclusive institutions are political and economic systems that promote broad participation, secure property rights, and create equal opportunities for people to pursue economic success. They encourage innovation, entrepreneurship, long term investment. They provide stability and incentive for people to work. These are the characteristics of inclusive institution. There is a broad distribution of power. Political and economic power is distributed across a wide range of people. Like in the case of a democratic setup, the power is not concentrated on one particular family or one particular group. The power is distributed between a large range of people. Then there is law and order. There is protection of property rights. Citizens have property rights. If you buy a land, that property, you own that property. Nobody has the right to take it away from you. You are protected by legal systems. The contracts will be ensured, law and order will be maintained. Then another characteristic is that there is political accountability and pluralism. Political accountability, that is, if you do not like the policies enforced by the politicians, the government at present, you have the right to vote them out of power in the next election. You can overthrow the government in the next election. You can decide not to vote for them and let another party come to the power. Then also, like there is also scope for diverse voices. Diverse voices can be heard in such a situation. There is encouragement of innovation and competition. Those who want to start businesses, those who want to invest, they are given all kinds of encouragement. So these are the broad characteristics of inclusive institutions. Now, examples of inclusive institutions can be seen in several countries. The US has a long history of inclusive institutions. It is rooted in its democratic political system and market economy. In South Korea, after the Korean War, South Korea adopted inclusive institutions, including democratic political system and economic policies that supported education and industrialization. And in United Kingdom, the Glorious Revolution of 1688, after that, parliamentary system was established, and this later paved the way for industrial revolution, and which led the country to the prosperity. But on the other hand, extractive institutions, just like the name implies, they are designed to extract resources from the majority of the population to benefit a small power group, just a small group of people who are all powerful. These institutions concentrate political and economic power in the hands of a few. The population as a whole does not have opportunity in decision-making process. Here, the priority is for short-term wealth extraction over long-term prosperity, leading to stagnant economies and eventually state failure. So the characteristics are, when you compare it with the inclusive institutions, we said that there's a broad distribution of power. Here there is concentration of power and wealth in the hands of a few. There is lack of property rights and weak rule of law. Law and order is not correctly maintained, or law is in favor of the power group. Even your property can be confiscated by the government if they so wishes. The ruling class can confiscate wealth or suppress economic activity. There is limited political participation. The majority of the people are excluded from decision making, either economic or political, and the opposition is repressed. So, and here innovations and competitions are discouraged because this may form a threat to the ruling power group. So they discourage innovation and competition. So these are some of the characteristics of extractive institutions, and the examples are North Korea is an example of extractive institution. After the war, they adopted a highly centralized system where the power was concentrated in the ruling class, and the vast majority of the population has no economic or political freedom. The second example is that of the colonies set up by the Spanish and Portuguese invaders of the Latin American countries. Here, extractive institutions were established. The book gives examples of how the Spaniards made colonies of Latin American countries, and they extracted gold bullions, gold and silver from these countries. What they demanded from the king was that give us a room full of gold. So the king, who was not able to provide them with a room full of gold, he was tortured and killed. And to another king, they asked one room full of gold and two rooms full of silver. And even when the king gave all this wealth, he was executed summarily. So in the case of extractive institutions, they have their priority was not long-term growth, long-term welfare of the people. Maximum resources can be extracted from the host country. And another example is that of Soviet Union. Under the communist regime, Soviet Union had extractive political institutions that concentrated power in the Communist Party. Although the Soviet Union experienced rapid industrialization, the absence of political and economic freedom led to stagnation, inefficiency, and eventual collapse. So, three different kinds of countries are given as example. One is where where a dynasty rule is there. Second, of colonization, and the third of the communist regime. So, inclusive institutions create conditions for sustainable economic growth by promoting innovation, individual initiative, and political participation. Extractive institutions may create wealth for a few in the short term, but ultimately it will stifle economic growth by limiting opportunities. The success or failure of nations is deeply connected to whether they adopt inclusive or extractive institutions. Inclusive institutions foster growth, while extractive institutions benefit a small elite group. So a central theme of the book is that nations face what the authors call critical junctures, pivotal moments in history that provide opportunities for change. These events, such as revolutions, wars, or technological breakthroughs, can either reinforce the status quo or shift a society towards more inclusive or extractive institutions. That is, every economy faces a critical point where you can choose what path to take. Even in the case of individuals, there are critical moments where your decisions decide which path to follow, how your life will be. That depends upon pivotal moments. And like that, for nations also, there are pivotal moments. In the case of India, we can say that the pivotal moment is the time when we achieved independence. At that point, we decided to have a democratic setup with inclusive institutions, which fostered our growth. The example given here is the revolution in England, which is a critical juncture for England, which led to inclusive political institutions, which supported economic growth. The authors use numerous historical examples to illustrate how institutions shape the success or failure of nations. So various examples are given. They compare North Korea versus South Korea. The stark divergence between North and South Korea is one of the book's most compelling examples. After the Second World War, the two Koreas began with similar culture, geography, and natural resources. However, North Korea's extractive communist regime led to extreme poverty and oppression, while South Korea's more inclusive political and economic institutions led to rapid economic growth and development. The Soviet Union also initially experienced rapid industrialization, but under extractive institutions ultimately collapsed due to lack of innovations. And Botswana is considered to be, Botswana in Africa is considered to be a success story. The country's leaders chose to build inclusive institutions after gaining independence. The other Another problem is that once established, this may lead to virtuous and vicious cycles. That is, inclusive institutions will lead to prosperity, which in turn strengthens the demand for more inclusive institutions, thus creating a virtuous cycle. Conversely, extractive institutions create vicious cycles where the concentration of power and wealth leads to further repression, corruption, and increasing power of the elite group. So these cycles are difficult to break, and reform is often resisted by those in power. The implications and conclusion of the book, Acemoglu and Robinson conclude that inclusive institutions are the key to long-term economic success and political stability. Countries that fail to adopt these institutions remain trapped in cycles of poverty, corruption, and authoritarianism, while critical junctures or pivotal moments offer opportunities for reform. The institutional change is often resisted by those in power. Ultimately, why nations fail suggests that for nations to succeed, they must create inclusive institutions that distribute power and opportunities broadly. It provides a powerful argument for the role of governance and institutional design in shaping the fortune of nations. Now, this is the second book in this series that is called The Narrow Corridor, States, Society, and the Fate of Liberty. So all the ideas presented in these books are interlinked, and that is why I took all these three books for the discussion. The second book says the main idea discussed in this book is that liberty is not something which is given to you as a gift. It is not something which someone hands over to you in a plate. You do not get liberty like that. For achieving liberty, you have to struggle every inch of the way. So the central argument of the narrow corridor is that liberty only flourishes within a narrow pathway, which requires a continuous struggle between the state and the society to balance power. Because there will be a powerful state, and because a powerful state will naturally wish to impose more and more laws on the people. So this can only be, they will try to widen the area of their power. This can only be countermanded by the society, by having a strong society. So only through society's protests can penal laws be disbarred. So the narrow corridor is a metaphorical space where liberty can thrive. That is, it is a space, it's an imaginary space where liberty thrives, liberty flourishes. But the position of countries in this narrow corridor is very fragile. It can change anytime. You can be thrown out of the narrow corridor any moment. So to remain in the narrow corridor, you should maintain a balance between a powerful state and a good society. So there should be a dynamic balance. For liberty to exist, there must be a strong and effective state capable of maintaining order and enforcing laws. But it must also be held in check by an equally strong and engaged society. Now, they have used three types of state which can dominate a society. There can be a despotic Leviathan, or absent Leviathan, or a shackled Leviathan. Leviathan is actually first used in the Bible to represent a sea monster, which was very powerful, which was even bigger than the whale, and which remains undefeated in power. But this Leviathan is considered to be a mythical creature, actually. But nowadays, when you use Leviathan, Leviathan means a mammoth organization or state. Here, Leviathan is used synonymously with state. So a powerful, dominating state, they call it as the despotic Leviathan. If the society is too powerful and the state is weak, then that is absent Leviathan. Then the shackled Leviathan, that is Leviathan in chains. Shackled means Leviathan in chains. Now, this is considered to be the ideal situation where the state is powerful enough to govern effectively, but is constrained or shackled by social institutions that prevent it from becoming tyrannical. This that is, there is an ongoing tension between the state and the society. So the despotic Leviathan. Despotic Leviathan means a ruler with absolute power. A despotic Leviathan arises when the state has unchecked power, becoming authoritarian or even totalitarian. In this situation, society is too weak to constrain the state's authority. So here the voices of the society is not heard, state has complete authority. China is an example where state has historically exercised extensive control over society. Even today, China's political system is characterized by centralized control and is considered to be an example of a despotic Leviathan. Absent Leviathan. This scenario occurs when the state is too weak to enforce laws or provide basic services, and the society is left to govern itself in a state of near anarchy or fragmentation. The result is often lawlessness, conflict, or instability. Somalia is often cited as an example of absent Leviathan, where the state is not very strong or the law and order of the state does not reach the people. Now, shackled Leviathan is considered to be the ideal situation where the state is powerful enough to govern effectively, but is constrained or shackled by social institutions that prevent it from becoming tyrannical. This ongoing tension ensures that the state remains accountable and does not abuse its power. Again, England, after the revolution, is a prime example of a shackled Leviathan. Now, Acemoglu and Robinson use the metaphor of the Red Queen effect to explain how the relationship between state and society must be dynamic. So what is the Red Queen effect, or who is the Red Queen? Now, Red Queen is a character from Alice in Wonderland. Lewis Carroll's famous children's book. It's not actually a children's book. It should be read by grown-ups, but it's often considered as a children's book. So it is from Alice in Wonderland. In the second part of Alice in Wonderland, which is called Through the Looking Glass, Alice wanders in through a mirror. And when she wanders in through the mirror, she meets several characters, which is familiar to her from nursery rhymes like Humpty Dumpty, Tweedledum and Tweedledee, like that. And she meets also the Red Queen. Now, the Red Queen is actually the picture card from the pack of cards. The picture of queen from the, if you play cards or if you're familiar with cards, you will remember the picture of the queen in the pack of cards, especially the queen of hearts, which is red in color. So that is the Red Queen, which Alice meets in her travels. So when Alice met the Red Queen was running. So Alice also ran with her. But after some time, Alice noticed that nothing around them changed. They are running around the same tree for some time. When the Red Queen came to a halt, came to a stop, Alice asked the Queen, why even after so much running, we have remained in the same place. We haven't moved forward at all. Why does that happen? So the Queen says that in our country, if you want to remain in the same place, you have to run fast. So Alice replies that it is not like that in our country. In our country, if you run, you will move forward. So the Queen says that it's a slow country. In our country, if you want to remain in the same place, you have to run fast. So Alice asked the Queen, so what should you do if you want to move forward? Then the Queen replies that if you want to move forward, you have to run twice as faster. So if you want to remain in the same place, you have to run fast. And if you want to move forward, you have to run twice as faster. So for the students, they may easily understand the example that suppose you have secured third place in the university examination. If you want to retain that third place, you have to work very hard. If you decide not to work, since you have already achieved third place, you are satisfied with that and you decide not to work, then your place in the rank list will go down. And suppose you want to move from third place to the first position, then you have to work twice as harder. So it is true in any example, you can relate that. So also is the case of liberty. For liberty to remain, you should always fight for liberty. You should always strive to establish liberty. you should always work hard to establish liberty. So just as the Red Queen must run continuously to stay in the same place, both the state and the society must evolve and grow stronger together to maintain liberty. If one side becomes stagnant or grows more powerful, the balance is lost and liberty is threatened. The state and society are in a constant race where both must strengthen and adapt to preserve the equilibrium that allows liberty to survive. Then they have introduced the concept of cage of norms. Now, cage of norms refers to a society's the, the tradition, religious beliefs, cultural norms, religious practices. Now, all these things limit individual freedom. Especially when the state is weak, social pressures and norms can prevent liberty from flourishing, trapping individuals within oppressive social structures. You have heard of honor killings. There has been honor killings, not merely in Middle East countries or Afghanistan or Pakistan, but even in India, even in Kerala, we have witnessed honor killings. But here, it is brought to the front of public by the media, the social media. They are all powerful, and because of that, the law metes out punishment to those who indulge in such practices. Even we have seen cases of black magic, superstitions. So all these things will flourish if there is no strong state to enforce law and order in the country. The authors argue that few nations enter the narrow corridor. Few nations are able to enter the narrow corridor, and the journey to the narrow corridor is fraught with obstacles. Several factors influence whether a state-society relationship enter and stays in the corridor. So, England's entry into the narrow corridor we have already mentioned. The China is one country which has never entered the narrow corridor. China practices a despotic leviathan, and it has a long history of centralized and bureaucratic rule. The state is powerful, and there is a despotic leviathan with strong centralized state. But the state has provided stability and economic growth, but there is individual freedoms are lost. Individual freedoms and political liberties are lost. The authors argue that China has never entered the narrow corridor. For United States, it's a fragile entry. That is, there's a precarious balance between the state and the society. There is a strong checks on the government by the society, and the authors emphasize that liberty in the US has not always been secure. Social movements were crucial in maintaining the country's position in the narrow corridor. In the case of India, we have to struggle with inequalities. India's democratic institutions provide a path to the narrow corridor, but the country faces significant challenges, including social inequalities, caste system, bureaucratic inefficiencies, etc. In the Middle East, many Middle East countries, the cage of norms constrains personal freedom. We can take the example of the Taliban government, where women are not allowed to, education is not provided to women. If women want to go out, they have to always have the presence of a male member. So gender norms and religious rules restrict the liberty of women and minorities in many parts of the region. So lessons for the future: maintaining the balance. Liberty is not a permanent state, but rather the result of an ongoing struggle between the state and society. Countries that have managed to enter the narrow corridor must continue to evolve both in the state capacity and the societal participation. The fragility of liberty: the authors emphasize that liberty is fragile. It is easily breakable. That is, you can easily move out of the narrow corridor. The forces that constrain the state can easily break down, allowing it to become authoritarian. Conversely, a state can collapse under social pressure. So strong and inclusive institutions are the key to stay in the narrow corridor. So we have come a full circle from we have started where we have come to where we have started in the beginning. That is the necessity of inclusive institutions. So strong and inclusive institutions are necessary There should be free media, there should be independent judiciary, there should be a robust civil society. All these are needed to ensure that the society remains engaged and empowered. In the narrow corridor, Acemoglu and Robinson argue that liberty is rare and difficult to achieve because it requires a fine balance between a powerful state and an empowered society. This balance is not static, it requires constant evolution, which they liken to the Red Queen effect. The Red Queen effect, we have discussed that is, if you want to remain in the same place, you have to run fast. And if you want to move forward, you have to run twice as faster. The book uses historical and contemporary examples to show how some societies have managed to enter and remain in the corridor while others have failed to establish or enter the corridor. Liberty. So, the main idea discussed here is liberty is not inevitable. It's the result of a continuous struggle between state power and societal influence. Maintaining this balance is essential to ensure that freedom persists. This is the last book we have taken, that is Power and Progress, Our 1,000-Year Struggle Over Technology and Prosperity. The book explores the complex relationship between technological progress, economic power, and human prosperity. It traces technological advances over the past 1,000 years, demonstrating how the benefits of innovation have often been distributed unequally. So, the technology development in technology is all good, but the problem is that who gets the fruits of the development, who gets the benefit of technology. The authors argue that technology in itself is not good or bad. It is shaped by the social, economic, and political forces that determine how its benefits are distributed. Acemoglu and Johnson show that throughout history, technology has often been harnessed to increase the power of the elites, reinforce inequality, even suppress human freedom. However, they also highlight moments when technology was used to democratize power, improve living standards, and create shared prosperity. So, technological progress does not automatically lead to shared prosperity. The historical patterns show that very often they initially benefit a small group, usually political or economic power groups. In many cases, these innovations are used to consolidate power and control labor rather than improve the well-being of the broader population. The Industrial Revolution created massive wealth for factory owners and investors, but for a long time, it led to terrible working conditions and low wages for the working class. It took political pressure, social movements, and reforms to ensure that the benefits of industrialization were more widely distributed. The role of elites in shaping technological outcomes. The authors emphasize that the power groups often use technology to reinforce their control over resources and labor. This is evident in both historical and modern contexts. In the 19th century, innovations in agricultural technology often displaced small farmers while benefiting large landowners. Similarly, today, AI and automation are sometimes used to increase corporate profits while reducing jobs, displacing labor, and suppressing wages for low-skilled workers. So, the need for societal action to ensure broadly shared prosperity. So, there should be institutional reforms, shared prosperity. There is, just because there is technological progress, it does not imply that this progress or this prosperity will be shared between people. Instead, it requires intentional societal action, including policies, institutions, and social movements that ensure that the benefits of the technology are distributed more equitably. Political mobilization. The book provides examples of how labor movements, democratic reforms, and progressive policies have historically played a key role in pushing back against elite domination and ensuring that technological advances improve the living standard for the broader population. Artificial intelligence and the future of work. The authors draw comparisons between historical technological transformations and the current rise of AI and automation. They argue that without significant intervention, AI could increase inequality, concentrate wealth and power in the hands of the few, while displacing large number of workers. While AI has the potential to improve productivity and create new opportunities, Acemoglu and Johnson caution that its benefits are not guaranteed to be shared equally. The direction in which AI is developed and deployed will be shaped by the choices society makes today, particularly in terms of regulation, labor rights, and social policy. The core message of Power and Progress is that technological progress is a double edged sword. While it has the potential to improve human well being and create shared prosperity, this outcome is not inevitable. Instead, the benefits of technological advances are often shaped by political, social, and economic forces. Throughout history, elites have often used technology to consolidate power and control, leaving much of the society behind. So they argue that in order to ensure the benefits of technology are broadly shared, active political engagement and institutional reforms are necessary. This include ensuring that labor rights are protected, wealth is distributed more equitably, public policies are designed to promote widespread well-being. The authors draw parallels between rise of AI today and previous technological transformations. AI could lead to increasing inequality. They say that AI could lead to increasing inequality, unemployment, and social unrest. So the policy interventions are necessary, and the book emphasizes the importance of democratic institutions in shaping technological outcomes. Now, I have, as the last part of the lecture, I have taken the case of India and how far these ideas are applicable in the case of the Indian scenario. The situation in India can be analyzed through the lenses provided by the books Why Nations Fail, The Narrow Corridor, and Power and Progress. These books focus on institutions, the balance of power, and the relationship between technology and society, offering insights into India's complex development path. Now, India has a mixed legacy when it comes to institutions. Post-independence, it has established democratic structure, an independent judiciary, relatively free press, contributing to inclusivity in political life. However, economic inclusivity remains incomplete. Despite liberalization since the 90s, structural issues such as corruption, bureaucratic inefficiencies, and chronic capitalism hinder broader economic participation. In India's case, the regional disparities, caste inequalities, and the persistence of informal economic sectors illustrate how certain segments of the society remain excluded from the benefit of economic growth. This situation aligns with Acemoglu's and Robinson's argument that without inclusive institutions, long-term prosperity is hard to achieve. India's democratic framework offers a degree of freedom and a societal voice, but it also faces challenges in state capacity, particularly in governance, law enforcement, and public service delivery. India has avoided the extremes of autocracy, preserving democratic freedom and social and civil society's vibrancy. The uneven performance of state governments in terms of health and education, economic management reflects this tension between a centralized power and regional autonomy. Striking the right balance is essential. Now, India's digital revolution has empowered millions, especially the digital payment system, Aadhaar, etc., has created new economic opportunities. However, the benefits of technology are unevenly distributed. The digital divide remains wide, with rural areas and marginalized communities often excluded from access to digital tools. So, India faces a crucial challenge in managing technological progress in a way that benefits the masses rather than increasing inequality. Automation threatens traditional manufacturing jobs, particularly in sectors that employ large numbers of unskilled or semi-skilled workers. The rise of gig economy jobs, though it provides flexibility, there is precarious working conditions and no stability. India's government has also embraced technology in governance, such as using digital platforms for welfare distribution. While this has streamlined some process, it has also raised concern about privacy, surveillance, and the potential misuse of data, reflecting that technology, when controlled by the state, can shift power dynamics in ways that may not always favor democracy. So, inclusive institutions, in the case of India, India needs to strengthen its institutions to be more inclusive, addressing inequalities related to caste, gender, and region. This includes reforms in governance, reducing corruption, and ensuring that economic opportunities are more widely distributed. So this country must continue to balance state power with societal freedoms, ensuring that state capacity improves in critical areas like infrastructure, welfare distribution, welfare delivery, while preserving democratic freedom. And technology should be harnessed for all. India's technological progress must be managed to ensure that it reduces rather than increases inequality. So, a reflection on the books by the Nobel Prize winners shows that India's trajectory requires conscious efforts to align institutions, state power, and technological progress in a way that promotes inclusivity and broad based development to achieve long term and sustained growth. So, these are the books I have mentioned, and thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for that illuminating session. Your thoughts have offered us a fresh perspective on this critical subject. We now move to the Q&A session where participants can post question and share reflection. For ease, please type your question in chat and I will read them aloud, or feel free to unmute and ask directly. Let's make the most of this opportunity to engage with the Professor Bindu Balagopal and dive deeper into this concept.
Parvati, you may read it out the question. There is a question in the chat box.
Okay, ma'am, there is a question for you. How do inclusive and extractive institutions shape the economic outcomes of nation, and why do they often persist over time?
Ma'am, you are muted. Okay.
So, whatever country you take, actually, there is the presence of inclusive institutions as well as extractive institutions. So, at critical junctures, at pivotal moments, what you adopt, whether to adopt more inclusive institutions or to have extractive institutions or to let in extractive institutions, that will shape the future of a country. In the case of India, we can see that there are a lot of inclusive institutions, like there is a good democratic setup, there is a good judiciary, there is more or less there is free press, there is a strong powerful society, social media is very active. In such cases, and because of this, we can see that there are many inclusive institutions which lead the country to prosperity. But on the other hand, there are also extractive institutions. That is, you can see the caste system existing in the country, the regional inequalities existing in the country, the problem of a unholy alliance between business groups and politicians, the crony capitalism existing in the country. So all these lead to extractive situations which will ultimately question the stand of India in the narrow corridor. So our position in the narrow corridor where there is liberty, it is very precarious. And if you balance the power between society and state, you can remain in the narrow corridor. India is in the pathway of narrow corridor, but we can be thrown out if you deviate from the democratic setup. We can remember a time when we were not in the narrow corridor, we were thrown out of the narrow corridor during the period of emergency. Actually, we were not in the narrow corridor when the liberty was threatened. That is the time when our when our position in the narrow corridor or the space of liberty was threatened. So that can happen. So the decisions you make in at pivotal moments, that decides whether the country will have long-term sustained growth or whether they will fall to stagnation and later on decline.
Okay, ma'am, there is another question for you. How can countries transition from the extractive to inclusive institution, and what challenges or resistance might they face in implementing such changes?
The problem is that power power you have heard of the adage that power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely. The uh, the attraction for power, the power is always like an intoxication for many people. And the people in the power, people in the ruling class will always try to increase the area of their power. They will try to impose many kind of laws on the country, on the people of the country. So if the society rises in protest, if there is a democratic process, and if the protest of the society will ensure that these leaders are thrown out and a new ruling class will come, then the chances of extractive institutions increasing will be lessened. You may remember the situation of the farm laws and the protests that arose from the farmers' side against the farm laws, which were which they feared that will reduce their welfare. And this protest actually succeeded, and they had to protest. We witnessed the year-long struggle of the farmers protesting against the farm laws, and the protest actually they became victorious in that protest, and the farm laws were repealed. So when the society intervenes and actively participates in the process, political process, actually the extractive institutions, the power of the extractive institutions will remain abated. So a strong democracy and a strong society is necessary to include more inclusive institutions and lessen extractive institutions.
Okay, ma'am, there is another question also. How can India draw its rich diversity to create more equitable institution, and what obstacles might it face in moving from an extractive to an inclusive approach in area like governance, business and land reforms?
That was what we have been discussing so far. That is, we have a democratic system, and we should ensure that the society has the voices, diverse voices are heard, and that the society, media, judiciary all intervenes if the state becomes too powerful or tries to enforce its rule of law on the people. So for a country to become more inclusive, the government should try to reduce the regional inequalities existing. People should be more educated. There should be better health facilities, infrastructural facilities, better standard of living, and more participation in the political process. So this will ensure that more inclusive institutions are there, and the extractive institutions will eventually decrease.
Okay, there is another question. What are the key factors that distinguish prosperous nation from poor ones?
According to the contributions of these authors, but there may be differences of opinion. According to the contributions of these authors, they say that the prosperous nations and the poor nations, they are distinguished by the presence of inclusive factors and extractive factors. Inclusive factors promote a country's prosperity, long-term development, sustained growth, and so on, while the increasing use of extractive resources, extractive institutions will ultimately cause stagnation to the economy, and the state will fall into a decline. So this is their viewpoint. The contributions of these economists focus mainly on two kinds of institutions, one which ensures prosperity and the other which may cause the nation to fall into a decline.
Okay, there is one more question also. Increasing debt on a country led to nation economic and political failure. We can take an instance of Sri Lanka. Does absolute democracy also play a role in it?
Actually, the situations or what happened in Sri Lanka and Bangladesh should be an example for us. So if the state becomes too extractive, if it does not consider the welfare of the people, actually the state can be overthrown, and a new new power group can come into being, or the ruling class can change. So our democratic rulers also should take lessons from what happened in Sri Lanka and what happened in Bangladesh.
One more question also. How 5 trillion economy is a ray of revenue generation for citizen and uplift the economic status?
Actually, new studies have uh, focused on the idea that is growth merely a play in numbers? So, should we say that our economy has achieved? Can we say that our economy is prosperous because we have achieved this much growth? If the growth is 5.6 or 6.5 or 7.2, so the growth, it is not mere numbers. So we have achieved this much growth, this is our revenue. Does it mean that this is shared equally by the citizens of India? No. It only goes to a very select few or a power group, to a very small percentage, less than 10 percentage. The majority of the population does not share in this prosperity. So how can we say that we are prosperous or we have achieved this much growth? So these questions are raised in the modern economic thought, especially in books like Downert Economics by Kate Raworth. It says that growth is not merely a number. Growth, you can say that a country has grown or become prosperous only when the fruits of the development are shared by the people. When there is this much inequality, you cannot say that you have achieved such uh, high growth or high revenue.
Hello, ma'am. I'm Shirley Phillip, who is a former faculty of the Department of Economics, Sacred Heart College. I was listening to your talk, and I'm happy to be part of this initiative, which has been continuing for years now in this department. Can you hear me?
Ah, yes, yes, ma'am. Please continue.
You know me, right, Bindu, ma'am?
Ah, yes, of course, surely.
Yeah.
Surely,
Okay.
ma'am.
Anyway,
Yes, yes.
it was a very interesting talk, structured so well through the three books: Why Nations Fail, Narrow Corridor, and Power and Progress. And I believe I got more insights into the work of these Nobel Prize winners, especially regarding the Leviathan concept and despotic Leviathan and absent Leviathan. Of course, the Red Queen, and also regarding you gave very interesting examples about Lewis Carroll's Alice in Wonderland and all that. So I feel that on the whole, just a few observations. On the whole, I could get a lot from your particular talk, and I believe that more for in India, more concerted efforts should be taken to reform our social institutions, to bring in more inclusivity and balance state power with civil society engagement, so that we can avoid the pitfalls of this extractive institutions and also navigate the narrow corridor uh, towards sustainable growth and social justice. In fact, I happened to read an article in Hindu just 2 days back. The particular Nobel Prize winner in physics, Geoffrey Hinton, he was talking about artificial intelligence. He regretted his work in artificial intelligence, thinking uh, he thought he was talking about the adverse effects of artificial intelligence on job generation, and also the point which you stressed, that is how technology should be equally distributed. But what happens normally in countries is that technology is in the hands of the powerful few, and it might actually accentuate the inequalities which are already existing. And people who have access to this kind of technology might be the ones who are benefiting from such platforms. So, saying this, uh, I thank you once again for giving a wonderful talk on this particular topic. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, Shirley, ma'am. Thanks for your comments and observations.
I think there is one more question in the chat box. Parvati, can you read it out? Okay.
Yes, I can read. How can India strike a balance between embracing AI-driven advancement and addressing the risk of rising unemployment, particularly through the policy that promote reskilling, support human centric roles, and encouraging AI integrated job growth?
That is actually to be seen in the future what will happen when AI becomes more rampant. Uh, people, the one prediction is that more people will get displaced. And the result of the technological advancement. Now we are all talking about AI, how AI can be used for this, how AI can be used for that. The the after effect of this technology, how it will affect people, how it will increase the surveillance, how it will affect stealing of data. All these, there are so many kinds of threats, some which we have visionized, some which we cannot even think about. So it is there in the future, and that depends very much on the type of government we have at the center, how the social media, how the media, the judicial system, all contributes towards ensuring that uh, freedom is there for the public, for the people.
I hope there are no more questions. Thank you to everyone who contributed such thoughtful questions, and a special thank you to Professor Bindu Balagopal for addressing them with such a insight. To formally conclude, I invite Ms. Haripriya S. Nath, Assistant Professor in the Department of Economics, to deliver the vote of thanks.
Good evening, everyone. It's my privilege to deliver the vote of thanks for today's enlightening session. Firstly, I would like to express my deepest gratitude to our esteemed resource person, Professor Bindu Balagopal ma'am, for sharing your invaluable knowledge and insights on why nations fail. Your expertise in the subject has not only expanded our understanding, but also inspired us to explore the topic further. We truly appreciate the time and effort you invested in making today's session highly informative and engaging. I would like to extend our heartfelt gratitude to Principal Dr. Sister Irene for their unwavering support and guidance. A special thanks to the organizing team, including Head of the Economics Department, Mr. Nigel Jacobi, dedicated department faculty members, and our committed students for ensuring that everything ran smoothly and seamlessly. I would also like to thank all the participants for your active engagement and thoughtful questions. Once again, thank you all, and we look forward to more such enlightening sessions in the future. Thank you.